What if the most stunning feature of your garden wasn't the flowers, but the borders and fences surrounding them? What if discarded bike parts and forgotten objects could transform your space into something truly magical? You're about to see how old, rusted items can create a garden that feels alive with stories. Not bought, not perfect, just real, simple, and full of soul. Welcome to Verto Studio, a space where upcycled creativity meets the beauty of nature. In this video, we're exploring DIY rustic garden borders and fence decor using old bike parts. Timestamps are included, so feel free to jump to the sections that inspire you the most. Got any questions or ideas? Drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. All the images and footage you see are purely for inspiration. These are ideas, not blueprints. Take what speaks to you and adapt it to what you have available, your tools, your space, and your creativity. Maybe to you, I'm just another voice in your feed. But behind this screen, there's a real person, a real story, and a real family. This isn't just a video, it's a piece of my heart. Every like, every comment, every subscribe, it means the world to us. When you click that subscribe button, you're not just supporting a creator, you're keeping a dream alive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for truly seeing us. There is a kind of quiet joy that arrives on a summer morning, when sunlight spills across the marigolds and something unexpected smiles back at you from beneath the blooms. It happened just beyond the garden path, where orange blossoms stood like cheerful sentinels, and lined up neatly along the edge, a row of penguins, 6 of them, stood guard. Not the icy kind from distant polar lands, but warm-hearted garden creatures, lovingly made from repurposed bottles, their white bellies proud and orange feet planted firmly in the soil. The garden had always welcomed a bit of whimsy, but these penguins brought laughter. Each one bore hand-cut wings, bright beaks, and googly eyes that sparkled in the morning dew. Their bottle bodies had been painted with care, black and white like the tuxedos they were born to wear. A little hand reached out to straighten one at the end of the line, perhaps a young helper who had lent their imagination to the process. Later that afternoon, one of the penguins was spotted perched on a wooden table beside a steaming mug, a coffee break companion, its painted smile quietly keeping watch while stories and plans for the next garden project bubbled into conversation. The blue hue of its bottle caught the light, and its flipper-like arms curved just enough to give it a bashful charm. Bits of twine and a dab of paint. That's all it had taken to turn something headed for the recycling bin into something utterly endearing. Down the mossy steps at the far end of the yard, 3 more penguins huddled together in playful conversation. Their glossy black bodies gleamed against the soft green moss, and just behind them, a single child's rain boot hinted at their creator's size. It was clear these weren't just decorations. They were participants in stories, explorers of stone steps and secret corners. Creating them didn't require perfection, only curiosity. A few saved bottles, a bit of paint, and the kind of afternoon where time feels slow and good. There's something satisfying in the way recycled things can be given new life, especially when they return to the earth in joy-filled forms like these. They now live throughout the garden. Some in a line, some in pairs, others popping up like little surprises behind pots and stepping stones. And every time you spot one, it feels like the start of a story. Maybe that's the gift of handmade garden creatures. They don't just decorate, they invite you to play again, to kneel in the soil with scissors and glue, to see the wonder in what's left behind, and to believe, even if just for a moment, that a plastic bottle can smile back. Evening came gently to the garden, as if on tiptoe. The day's warmth lingered just long enough to soften the breeze, and as twilight settled, A soft glow flickered to life at the center of the round wooden table. There, nestled around a little lantern, sat a gathering of owls. Not feathered, not wild, but wide-eyed and full of wonder. They were made of clay and metal, some with burlap wings, some with wire toes curled over the grain of the wood. A pair of garden gloves rested nearby, a quiet sign that someone had been tending and dreaming, making space for magic. Each owl seemed caught mid-conversation, their round eyes glinting in the candlelight as though they remembered stories the wind once told. The whole scene had the hush of a woodland council, and it would have been easy to believe that, once the humans left, these little creatures might ruffle their wings and speak. Earlier in the day, on the sunlit edge of the railing, 3 glass-bodied owls perched proudly, crafted from old light bulbs and scraps of paper. Their eyes were buttons, mismatched and oversized, giving them an expression of permanent curiosity. Painted cardboard wings and colorful ears completed their playful disguise. A breeze ruffled the leaves behind them as wind chimes sang in the background, their tiny feet made from twisted nails tapping the wood like a rhythm only owls would know. And tucked between basil and bloom in a black planter box, a single felt owl watched over the herbs. Perched on a slender wooden dowel, its heart-spotted belly peeked through the stems. With round yellow eyes and a stitched beak, it brought a softness to the garden bed, like a guardian for seedlings just beginning to dream of the sky. What's beautiful about these owls is not just how charming they are, but how quietly they invite creation. They begin with things already at hand, light bulbs, buttons, fabric scraps, even garden stakes, and ask only for a little time and a touch of imagination. No two ever turn out the same, and that's the joy of it. They roost in windowsills, flower pots, or lantern-lit tables, carrying a whisper of handmade love. When dusk deepens and the world slows, there's comfort in knowing they're still out there, watching, listening, waiting for morning. And if you ever find yourself with quiet hands and a need to make something small and sweet, start with an owl. Let it perch where it pleases. Let it remind you that the smallest sparks can bring the softest light. At the edge of the garden, just where the moss rolls out like a soft green carpet, a parade of bottle-cap bugs began their joyful march. The morning sun filtered through the leaves, catching the sparkle in their googly eyes and the shimmer of their colorful pipe cleaner legs. They were small, cheerful creatures, cobbled together from the most ordinary bits: red caps, green caps, little lids of blue and yellow, all fastened into wiggly bodies full of play. One had pink antennae tipped with beads that glowed like morning dew. Another paused beside a daisy, nose to nose with the bloom, as if whispering hello. They'd been made with laughter, you could tell. A handful of plastic tops, some hot glue, a sprinkle of imagination. There was something incredibly satisfying about the way each one turned out different. Some were long and elegant, with a dozen legs prancing across a stone. Others were stubby and round, with stubby feet and big smiles, their faces painted on with the steadiness only a child's hand can offer. Later in the day, I found them lined up along the wooden edge of a raised bed, crawling slowly across a blanket of moss. A child's hand reached down gently to adjust one, green and white, with a bright red face, making sure it kept up with its friends. It felt like watching a miniature carnival winding its way through the garden. A tiny banner flapped in the breeze, marking the beginning of their journey. And just beside the stone path, nestled beneath a curled brown leaf, a particularly regal bug stood proud on a pebble throne. Its body was long, lined with perfectly matched bottle caps in reds and blues and sunny yellows, its tiny legs made of inverted push pins that gave it height and bounce. Its pipe cleaner antennae stood tall, ending in sparkly beads that caught the light like jewels. Despite its recycled roots, it looked almost royal. There's a kind of delight that only handmade creatures can bring. You start with what would otherwise be thrown away. Caps from juice bottles, old beads, packaging scraps. and you end with a garden full of life. No instructions needed, just a willingness to tinker, to glue and giggle and try again. Each one becomes its own tiny world of expression. So if ever your garden feels a little too still, gather what's around. Sit with the children or simply with your own wonder. Twist the pipe cleaners. Choose the silliest eyes. And let a line of bright little bugs begin their march. They might not be real, but the joy they bring absolutely is. It was the kind of afternoon that invites you to pause, warm, slow, and sunlit, with glasses of lemonade beating gently on a garden table. The succulents sat in their tidy tray, and just beside them, a little crowd had gathered. Not people, but turtles. 6 of them, each more wide-eyed than the next, their shells in soft shades of green, yellow, and tan. They looked as though they'd just wandered in for a drink, settling beside the straws and seed cards with all the casual charm of tiny, handmade guests. Their shells were once yogurt cups and painted bowls, now turned into domes of delight with a bit of foam or careful strokes of a marker. Their legs stretched out from bits of cut card, some stiff and straight, others slightly bent, as if mid-step. There was something so endearing in the way they tilted their heads upward, curious, like they were listening to garden stories in the breeze. A few hours later, down the stone path, one solitary turtle was spotted beside a clover. Its shell bore the brushstrokes of a child's effort, thick and earnest. A green bottle cap made up its smiling face, and its limbs were cut from rough cardboard, splayed in determined stance. It looked ready for adventure, or maybe just proud to be finished and on its way. And in a patch of moss near a tiny wooden bridge, 2 more turtles lingered in the pebbles, carefully placed by small, careful hands. Their shells had been drawn with detail, neat lines, thoughtful color. Nearby, a hand held a trowel, the kind children use when the soil feels soft and full of promise. It felt like a secret garden had come alive, a miniature world within the larger one, where turtles had places to go and children were the caretakers of joy. These turtles were never rushed. That was their gift, made slowly from leftover craft scraps and odds and ends, bottle lids, yogurt pots, markers, and glue. They celebrated the pleasure of taking your time, of making something not because it's needed, but because it brings a smile. You don't need a reason to start. Just a patch of sun, a few recycled containers, and perhaps a child beside you or the memory of one. Let the paint run a little. Let the eyes go on crooked. What matters most is the feeling. The stillness, the laughter, the quiet sense that something small has come to life beneath your fingertips. And when they're done, let them roam. Across the table, down the path, through the mossy beds and storybook bridges. The garden is big enough for them all. Sometimes, when you look closely at the herb bed, down low where the basil brushes the soil and thyme winds gently around, something catches your eye. It might be the glint of sunlight on a curved shell, or the whisper of a hand reaching forward, softly poised above a surprise. That morning, nestled between the green, 3 tiny ladybugs were waking from their eggshell cradles. Their shells, once home to breakfast, had been painted with patience, speckled with spots, and given wide-eyed expressions that made them seem shy and delighted all at once. They looked like they had just emerged from sleep, stretching beneath the warm sky, still half-tucked inside their broken homes. You could imagine them blinking at the world, adjusting to the colors of thyme and the scent of lemon basil, their black painted faces peeking through with wonder. Further along the garden, the scene shifted to leaves still dressed in raindrops. There, atop a waxy green blade, 4 red-shelled ladybugs had taken up residence. Their bright backs gleamed, painted smooth with care and split down the middle with a fine black line. Each one bore its own little story in the brushstroke. Slightly crooked dots, a smudge here or there, all part of their charm. The droplets sparkled around them like morning gems, and for a moment, it felt like a lullaby had settled in the garden. Quiet, fresh, and full of life. And then, on the warm stone near a garden spade, a natural marvel. A ring of real ladybug shells, nestled together in a perfect circle. Their amber sheen and spotted armor formed a delicate wreath, untouched by paint or glue. A spoon rested nearby, as if someone had paused mid-task to observe the tiny miracle. Nature arranging itself into beauty without prompting. There's something timeless in making ladybugs for your garden. Not just because they're symbols of luck, but because they're so easy to create from what's already around. Cracked eggshells, a few dabs of paint, a pair of googly eyes. They ask only for gentleness. A soft touch to keep the shell whole. A steady hand for the spots. A place among the plants where they can feel at home. And when they're placed just right, under leaves, along stones, among herbs, they become part of the garden's whispering world. Visitors smile when they find them. Children lean closer. The bugs, whether born of brush or nature's own rhythm, offer something simple but important. A reminder to look closely and to delight in the small, secret joys waiting beneath the leaves. There's a kind of happiness that hovers in the air on a late summer afternoon, somewhere between the scent of daisies and the laughter that floats over the garden fence. On the edge of a wooden rail, two cheerful bees sat side by side, their can-shaped bodies painted with bold black stripes and sunshine yellow. Their wings, made of wire mesh, looked ready for flight, though they seemed perfectly content to stay grounded, smiling wide-eyed beneath the shade of hanging baskets. Their legs dangled with playful ease, fashioned from old metal parts and odds found in the kitchen drawer. What made them most charming wasn't just their sturdy stance or painted grins. It was how clearly they had been made with care. The kind of care that comes from quiet mornings, sticky glue fingers, and sharing stories while crafting something joyful from nothing. Just beyond the patio, hanging gently from a low tree branch, another bee danced in the breeze. It swung slowly above the daisies, its plastic wings catching the light in delicate veins. Its pipe-cleaner legs stretched out as if in motion, and the soft blur of its flight made it feel almost real. Beneath it, the clover and grass swayed, as though they, too, had paused to watch this creation hum through the garden air. It was easy to forget these bees were born from cans, lids, and bits of scrap, the forgotten corners of kitchen recycling. Yet here they were, transformed. Black electrical tape, googly eyes, even a piece of sponge for the face. Every piece reimagined, every detail placed with delight. They weren't just decorations. They were personalities stitched together with creativity and love. And in that quiet, flowering space, surrounded by color and rustling green, the garden seemed to lean in and approve. A simple reminder settled in the moment. That joy doesn't always come in the form of something new, but often in the art of transformation. Taking what we already have, reshaping it with our hands, and giving it wings. So if you find yourself with a few empty tins, a bit of wire, and a heart that's longing for a little sunshine, make a bee. Hang it in a tree or perch it by your herbs. Let it remind you, and those who pass by, that beauty buzzes in the simplest acts of making. And sometimes all it takes is a smile with wings. There's a kind of quiet mischief that lives in the corners of a garden, on the mossy stones, near the mint patch, where the light flickers through leaves like laughter. That's where they first appeared. 3 frogs, bright-eyed and plastic-limbed, perched like guardians on a soft green cushion of moss. Their bodies were made of colorful caps and their limbs from white forks, arms flung wide as if in song. Someone had added googly eyes, tilted just enough to give each frog its own expression. The red one looked especially proud, the green a bit bashful, and the blue one simply amused. They sat beneath a little plant marker labeled Mint, and it seemed fitting, fresh, unexpected. A tiny trio of joy born from nothing more than bottle caps and picnic leftovers. Just past the lily pond, another frog sat at the edge of the water, glistening with raindrops. Made from green-painted plastic, it crouched with elegant limbs stretched forward, peering over the still surface like it was about to leap or whisper something to the lily pads. There was real stillness there, as if the frog and the pond understood each other. The water held its breath, the frog didn't blink, and everything felt whole. Back up on the garden steps, two frogs struck poses that could only be described as theatrical. Made entirely from old silverware, they looked like dancers frozen mid-performance. Spoons for feet, forks for hands, and eyes perched atop heads made from scalloped metal. Their limbs caught the sunlight, casting funny shadows on the brick. One looked ready to bow, the other mid-leap. And though they were crafted from cold steel, their energy was warm and playful, like they'd been caught mid-rehearsal in the middle of a garden ballet. The beauty in these frogs isn't just in their humor or posture. It's in their creation. Bits of plastic, discarded forks, forgotten tins, all transformed with imagination. They remind us that we don't need expensive materials or perfect skills. Just a few quiet hours, some glue, and the willingness to bring whimsy to life. They can sit by herbs or near the pond, on windowsills or tucked into flower beds. They might not croak or leap, but they make people smile. And sometimes, especially in gardens full of growing things and slow afternoons, that's the kind of magic that matters most. So gather what you've got. Cap, a spoon, an idea. Let the frogs come to life. Let them take their place among the plants and pebbles. And let them tell their silent, smiling stories. In the soft golden hush of late afternoon, just where the flower pots cast long shadows across the mulch, a curious quartet began to emerge from a terracotta tunnel. Not garden pests, but striped charmers. For snakes, stitched from old socks, slithering slowly into the world with bright button eyes and felt tongues. They looked neither fierce nor sly, but rather like they'd been caught mid-story, playfully whispering secrets beneath the leaves. Their bodies curled with a gentle bounce, soft and steady, filled with whatever was handy. Maybe rice or lentils or a pinch of lavender for those who think ahead. Their stripes wrapped around them like warm sweaters, some bold, some faded, each one delightfully unique. Blue, green, black, and mint eyes blinked back from upturned faces as they peeked toward the sunlight. One snake found its way to the garden bench, lounging beside a potted herb with the ease of a seasoned observer. Its pink and gray stripes gave it a softer presence, and it seemed quite content to keep watch while the breeze stirred the leaves. With every stitched curve and round eye, it told of afternoons spent indoors with scissors and thread, hands moving quietly while birds called from the trees outside. Across the gravel path, two more snakes stretched out in the sun, their colors soft as spring pastels. One peach, one lavender. Smooth pebbles rested along their backs like borrowed burdens from the earth. They looked like they were playing a slow game of tag or pretending to be real, daring someone to come closer and check. Nearby, a sandal lay tipped on its side, the kind of forgotten trace that made the whole scene feel all the more alive. These sock snakes weren't made in a rush. They were born in the spirit of reuse and play, of giving a second life to the lost sock from the laundry basket or the button jar no one ever quite empties. And that's what made them beautiful. No pattern needed, just a willingness to try, a moment of pause, and a desire to bring a little wonder to the garden floor. Now they rest in the soil, under pots, on benches, and beside the sandbox. Not scary, not sneaky, just friendly little guardians of green spaces, stitched from scraps and stuffed with love. So next time the sock drawer turns up a lonely one, don't toss it. Fill it, twist it, give it eyes and a flickering tongue. Let it wander out into the garden. Let it remind you that even the quietest things can bring the brightest smiles. If you crouch low enough in a garden, lower than the flower beds, beneath the climbing ivy, where the light softens and the air feels still, you might just witness something marvelous. There, nestled atop a flat garden stone, a colorful cluster of beetles had gathered. Not the scuttling kind, but ones painted with love and glitter. Their bodies crafted from mason jar lids, each leg a twist of wire and each antenna crowned with a pinhead sparkle. The green ones sat calmly, some with tiny gems for eyes, others with their backs decorated like miniature shields. A child's hand reached gently toward a coppery beetle at the edge, as if greeting an old friend. These tiny bugs, made of the simplest things, lids, wire, and craft pins, didn't crawl or fly, but they made the rock feel alive. A few feet away, resting in a sunbeam on the wooden deck, a silver beetle shimmered like treasure. Its wings, delicate and translucent, caught the golden light. Its frame was assembled from soda can pieces and twisty wire, its legs long and spindly. A closer look revealed a bottle-cap body and antennae that curled ever so slightly. It looked like it might buzz away at any moment, though it stayed perfectly still, as if grateful for the quiet. Then, near the ivy-covered fence, a trio of beetles lined the wooden rail like they were on patrol. Their wings were spread mid-flight, amber and chestnut against the green leaves. Each one seemed to gaze outward, protecting the garden like gentle sentinels. They were crafted with care, rigid shells, jointed legs, even tiny horns. There was an elegance to their placement, as though someone had paused during their work, arranging them just so. Together, these beetles turned the garden into a miniature theater of whimsy, a parade of color and imagination. With wire and lids, old cans and creative hands, life had been breathed into forgotten bits. The magic was not in the perfection, but in the act of making, the joy of creating something delightful from the overlooked. They perched on fences and basked on stone, not to be realistic, but to bring a touch of wonder. These beetles didn't bite or buzz, but they reminded passersby to look a little closer, to kneel beside the path and smile at what might be hiding just under the ivy's edge. And perhaps one day, with a handful of wire and a couple of lids, your own beetle will find its place in the garden, waiting, glinting, inviting a closer look. In the hush of early morning, just as dew still clung to the moss and stones, the garden came alive not with chirps or rustles, but with quiet smiles. There, on a low stone slab, surrounded by curled leaves and tiny pebbles, sat a trio of whimsical frog friends. Each was a joyful surprise of recycled charm. Their colorful bottle-cap heads perched atop plastic forks, wide-eyed and ready for mischief. Mint read the tiny sign near them, as if they were the sentinels of a magical herb bed. Not far from their laughter-filled gathering, another frog gazed solemnly over a lily-speckled pond. This one was sturdy, crafted from green plastic, speckled with raindrops like jewels. Its eyes, large and trusting, peered out across the water as if deep in amphibian thought. The simplicity of its design, fork feet, curving limbs, made it feel oddly lifelike, as though it had grown from the earth itself. Then, at the sunniest edge of the patio, two metallic frogs stood mid-duel, forks splayed like outstretched arms in a playful standoff. Made from shiny silverware, they caught the light with every exaggerated pose. Their bodies clicked softly when the breeze brushed past, as if clinking laughter shared between two old friends locked in a game of leapfrog or mock battle. Each frog in this little wonderland told its own tale. The bottle-cap trio whispered of kitchen drawer rescues and mossy hideouts. The lily pond guardian reminded us to look gently, closely, at what's beneath the surface. And the silver sentinels? They beckoned us to play, to see spoons and forks not as utensils but as limbs ready to dance. Creating your own garden frogs is as simple as letting your imagination hop free. Whether you reach for plastic forks, metal cutlery, or the bits and bobs that hide in junk drawers, Something magical happens when you give discarded things a second life, especially under open skies and among the growing green. So next time you wander through your garden, pause a moment by the herbs or the patio edge. You just might spot a gleam of fork leg or a googly eye watching quietly from the shade. And who knows, perhaps it's time to invite a few more frog friends to join them. In the hush of late morning, when dandelions glow like lanterns on mossy logs, something quite delightful peeks into the sunlight. Silver-tipped and round-eyed, gentle and still. A hedgehog, not of quills and paws, but of glinting teaspoons and soft laughter, stands steady on 4 spoon feet as a child's hand reaches gently to greet it. The garden smiles, and even the moss seems to cushion the scene with an air of wonder. Nearby, a pair of cheerful siblings sits at the edge of a marigold bed, their backs made of white plastic spoons fanned like fireworks in bloom. They perch on painted stones, their eyes wide with curiosity, facing a tiny seed packet and a well-worn hand rake left from the morning's planting. These little hedgehogs, assembled with glue and joy, add a pinch of storybook magic to the flower rose. Their presence makes it feel as though something enchanted might truly be living among the petals. A third hedgehog, lavender-hued and nestled beside a sleepy lavender bush, rests on a warm stone path. Its translucent spoon spines shimmer in the golden hour light. It looks ready to whisper secrets to the wind, or perhaps to follow a wandering beetle into the foliage. It doesn't move, but then again, maybe it only stirs when no one's watching. Each hedgehog was born not from a shop or shelf, but from a quiet afternoon, a handful of forgotten spoons, some stones, and a spark of imagination. Their eyes, googly or hand-drawn, carry the soul of their maker, and their little pebble noses seem to twitch with personality. For those looking to invite play into their planting or whimsy into their weeding, these creations are as simple as they are sweet. There's no need for precision, just patience, a warm cup of tea, and a willingness to turn old things into gentle companions. In gardens big or small, these little creatures nestle in corners and beside planters, waiting for discovery. And when children come running or neighbors drop by, they always earn a smile, a chuckle, maybe even a name. The beauty of it all lies not in how perfect the hedgehogs are, but in how they invite you to slow down, to notice the texture of moss beneath your feet, the way the sun dapples across a garden bench, or how something as ordinary as a plastic spoon can feel like a whisper from a woodland dream. So take a stroll, gather your scraps, and see who might be waiting to come to life in your own backyard. In the quiet of the garden, where the daisies lean and the ivy climbs like whispered stories along the fence, a colony of curious creatures had gathered, born not of soil or wing, but from hands filled with wonder and lids from forgotten jars. It began on a flat stone beneath a lavender bush, where a circle of painted beetles rested like polished gems. Greens and blues gleamed under the sun, their bodies crafted from bottle caps, their legs twisted from bits of wire, their antennae dotted with pinheads and glassy beads. A small hand reached out, choosing one, a warm brown beetle with a humble tilt, and gave it a gentle nudge, as if to welcome it to the world. Across the deck, a glint of metal caught the light. A silvery insect, made from a soda cap and delicate copper wire, posed with translucent wings outspread. It shimmered in the late morning sun, balanced near a leaf as golden as its delicate frame. Its creator had bent and shaped every leg with care, giving it the proud stance of a creature who'd always belonged among the garden's blooms. Along a railing tucked in a quiet corner, 3 beetles stood in a row, watching like tiny sentinels. Their wings were smooth and richly colored, copper and charcoal, folded as if ready for flight. From a distance, they could be mistaken for real, but up close, the subtle brush strokes and hidden screws revealed their clever disguise. The ivy curled around them like an audience applauding a well-kept secret. What made these creatures special wasn't just their form, but the joy they invited. A child's hand hovered above them not with fear, but fascination. Parents and little ones, huddled over garden tables or nestled by flower beds, twisted, glued, painted, and imagined together. Old jam lids, bent forks, buttons from a sewing tin. Nothing was wasted. Everything became wings, legs, eyes, or joy. This wasn't about perfection. It was about delight, the kind that hums in the belly when you see something you've made sitting proudly among the petunias. These bug friends didn't bite, didn't buzz, and didn't ask for anything more than a patch of sun and a curious eye. If you have a few old lids, some garden wire, maybe a button or two, there's a beetle waiting to be born from your fingertips. Let the garden be their stage and your hands the spark. You may just find that, like the best stories, these little creatures find a way to stay with you. As the sun stretches long across the garden, there is a hush, the kind that gently brushes your cheek like wind through lavender stems. In that golden quiet, it's easy to believe the garden might be whispering stories, especially when curious little creatures begin to emerge, born not from fur or feather, but from our own hands and scraps of the everyday. On the edge of the patio table, under the soft shade of a birch, two squirrels seem to be sharing secrets. Their whiskers, made of broom bristles, twitch in conversation, while their bushy tails, bundles of straw and fiber, arc skyward like question marks. A cup of tea cools beside them, and a pair of patterned gardening gloves rests like forgotten company. These squirrels are formed from cardboard tubes and wonder, the sort of craft you create with children on a rainy afternoon and bring out again for sunshine and smiles. Not far from the herb bed, another squirrel stands alert beside an acorn, his fur the color of cinnamon, his tail plump with faux fur puffed by the wind. He watches a falling leaf with glassy eyes, his paper feet planted firmly on a stone. There's a truth in that moment, the way a bit of craft can nestle into nature and suddenly seem as much a part of the garden as the time that brushes its flanks. Behind him, another squirrel peeks out from the thicket. With googly eyes and toothpick whiskers, he grins with a crooked charm. His nose is a painted pom-pom, his tail upright and proud. Among the sprigs of green and the scuffed boots of a little helper nearby, he looks like he might scamper at any moment, perhaps to hide some imaginary nut beneath the thyme. There's no need for perfection here. These creatures are made from what's on hand. Toilet rolls, bits of felt, yarn, leaves, and laughter. That's the beauty. With a few snips and a playful heart, anyone can welcome a menagerie into their garden. Companions for tea breaks, guardians of flower beds, silent storytellers beside the basil. And in the quiet that follows, with the scent of lavender and fresh earth in the air, you might just find yourself smiling at a squirrel made of cardboard. Not because he's real, but because he belongs. Just like you right there in the green.